Welcome, everyone. I have started the recording, so this is official. We are welcoming Heather Turner back for a third week in a row. WordPress 103. Yes, you will get recordings to 101 and 102 when you get the recording for 103. Before we get started, I have to do a little bit of SCORE business. I just want to let you know that SCORE, who's bringing you this presentation, is a nationwide nonprofit organization that's an independent resource partner of the Small Business Administration. We provide small businesses with free, always free, confidential business mentoring. We have our local workshops are available online. There are about 300 chapters nationwide and about 10,000 volunteers. Our chapter, which is the Minnesota chapter serving Manatee and Sarasota counties, has about 90 volunteers waiting to help you. All you have to do is ask for help and you get it. Our chapter was recently named a District Chapter of the Year. So where in the business cycle can we help you? Well, really, right from inception, you woke up, you had a good idea or thought it was a good idea. Let's kick it around. We'll help you determine whether or not you could make money with that idea. Or you're in the startup phase and now you realize that you don't have all the tools that you need. We can help you with that. Or you're in business and are thinking about growing. Lastly, if you're selling or closing a business, we can help you with that, or exiting. Front page, do you mean photos and content? Not sure. So how can you get a mentor? Well, you click on the request a mentor button after you go to score.org/Minnesota. You can see mentoring profiles. You can actually choose your own mentor if you'd like, or you can look at workshops. All of our workshops are recorded and available on our website. So go over to score.org/Minnesota and check it out. And lastly, I want to thank our community partners and sponsors. Sponsors are the ones that help us keep the lights on. They help supply us with money that we need to run our organization. You'll notice a lot of them are banks. If you go into one of these financial institutions with a SCORE mentor, they're probably going to listen to you a lot more than they will if you walk in with a pile of papers in your hand. So, without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and welcome Heather Turner, who is also a SCORE mentor. She is in the Granite region. If you don't know where the Granite region is, she'll tell you. Take it away, Heather.
Thank you, Diane. So the Granite region is New Hampshire. So SCORE Granite region covers most of New Hampshire and part of Vermont. I end up doing the sales pitch for our SCORE chapter pretty much for every meeting. So that's part of the pitch. So for those of you who have been on before, I think I introduced myself first. I did not start out using WordPress when I was doing web design originally 20 years ago. I was using plain old HTML. I kind of had to learn WordPress under duress. So it's honestly not my favorite, but it has become a very good tool for me. So I've learned to like a lot of parts of it. And the things that I didn't like about it originally, I have actually slowly served to go over to the I guess not the dark side, but the good side of that. WordPress is complicated. That is not to say that anybody can't do it, but there is a fairly big learning curve. Okay. So what we went over in the first few sessions, if you haven't had a chance to review those, were some basics about, plugins, where to find them, how to make sure that they're secure, themes, the fact that, what you see is not necessarily what you get when you download and install a free one or a paid one. So if you haven't reviewed those, please take a few minutes to do that. I will try to not do the squirrel mode today, which means that someone asks a question and I'll get derailed and turn into another topic because I do have a list of things that I want to cover today. But I want to show you some things that I have found very, very helpful as I've gone along, and I'd learned WordPress, 10 years ago or so. And a lot of it was trial and error. Some things they do go over in WordPress classes. We have an expert on this call today too. I'm gonna nudge him a little bit too. Please feel free, Rick, to put comments into chat if you find additional things as I go along that are helpful. With that, I'm gonna share my screen. And if I will try to monitor chat. If something that I'm sharing is not very, very visible or you need it enlarged, please let me know. Okay, all right. So this is kind of the homepage. This is the dashboard of WordPress itself. Okay. Now I kind of want to just go through a couple of simple things. Up here, you see coming soon mode, for example. So if I took this site right here and I brought it into what's called incognito mode, you're not actually going to see anything. It's just going to see coming soon. Okay. And if you're going to do WordPress for the first time and you're going to build your site from scratch, what I would recommend is putting something called a plugin in. And in this particular case, the plugin that I use is called SeedProd. And you can see that over here on the left-hand side. There's a free version of it and a paid version. But what SeedProd does is it, if I make it bigger, does that help a bit? Okay, good. Okay, what SeedProd does is it will basically protect your site from being public. So if you're building it a step at a time, you're building it at a page at a time, somebody isn't coming to your website and Google isn't picking the information up and saying, oh, look, here's your homepage, but your about page doesn't have anything on it yet. So there's other plugins that will help protect the site from Google picking it up and people being able to view that. And if you're building that, yep, absolutely. So if you're building that from scratch, and I'll kind of walk you through the back end of how to do this. So incognito window. So here we can see it just says coming soon. So none of the pages that I'm working on right now or the blog post or anything else is public. So if you're just starting out building your site, for example, you might want to do this again. And let me show you where to find a plugin. So I'll go over here on the left-hand side. So this is kind of your menu. It's going to change a little bit depending on what you have installed. So if I have additional plugins, for example, installed, you might see them appear on the left-hand side. If I have additional themes installed, it might show on the left-hand side too. And just to give you an example of this, SeedProd is a plugin, for example. All-in-one WP migration, that's what I use for a backup utility, is a plugin. Yoast SEO is a plugin, and Divi is the website block builder that I like to use personally. It's very similar in some ways to Elementor. And I like personally, and this is a personal one, not an endorsement, because I find it's very, very flexible. Okay, I'm going to go over here to installed plugins. Okay. And so, for example, these are all of the plugins that I currently have installed. In the last, I think it was either the last session or the first session, I talked about updating things. Okay. Now you can see that I have all plugins. 5 of these are active, 2 of these are inactive, which means that they're installed on the site. So all of their files, all of the capabilities are in the site, but they are not currently workable. So there's nothing going on with them. I can edit the options, but they're not interacting with the site itself. Okay. Now here you can see there's a new version of Yoast SEO available. In general terms, I would hit update now, but considering that this is live, I'm going to stop that because knowing me and internet occasionally, if I do that now, the whole thing will fail and we don't want that to happen. Okay. But here we have this coming soon page, maintenance mode, landing page in WordPress. This is also a website block builder. Okay. Again, there's a free version and a paid version. A lot of these good plugins have free and paid versions. It really depends on what you need them to do. This is just the free version. So in this particular case, after I've installed this, and I'll walk you through that in a second again, I'm going to hit settings. Okay. And it's just going to say coming soon mode, maintenance mode, login page, 404 page. And I'm not going to go into all of these in detail, but I want to just hit this one. All you need to do is hit active, and it'll just put up that coming soon page. Okay. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay. So I'm going to go back to installed plugins again. Okay. Now, when you want to activate and deactivate things, literally all you have to do is just hit activate or deactivate, okay? sometimes you might have a plugin conflict, and I'm going to repeat this because I had mentioned this before, is if you ever see a bar that says update now, but it says this version is not compatible with a current theme or a current version of WordPress, please don't update it, because this can cause your site to crash, not 100% of the time, but it's more likely to cause some issues. You might want to research that and just make sure that it is compatible, because the one thing that I don't want to see is people go through and just happily hit update, 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 and all of a sudden something happens to their site that they've spent sometimes hundreds of hours working on. I tend to err on the side of being overcautious about things. Okay. Now, some of these additional things have additional settings. So for example, I have something in here called advanced editor tools. And if you don't see anything that says additional settings, there isn't anything. That's kind of what you see is what you get when it comes to plugins. In here, if I go into settings, for example, it's going to give me some additional options. This is kind of an additional built-in editor that you can use. I personally like to use it because it makes the interface look a lot more like Microsoft Word, which I use all the time, and I think most people are familiar with it. So if I wanted to add, for example, the underline option in here, I could just drag it up. Okay. One of the things to remember is don't forget in any of these things, there's a lot of different options. Don't forget, and if you can see this down at the bottom, if you're going to change anything in the options and change anything in the settings, always make sure you hit save changes. Okay. So this gives me the options. Today, I'm going to actually be showing you the block editor in Gutenberg. And again, I'm probably a little biased. I started WordPress years ago, and I started with something called the classic editor. I personally have a preference for the classic editor. Most people, when they're starting out with WordPress right away, use the Gutenberg editor, which is a basically block editor that comes with WordPress, because that's the only one that they know and exist. I'm not going to say one is better than the other. My personal preference is for the classic one, but we're going to be using the block editor today because that's going to be the one that most people are going to be familiar with. And yeah, I would say overcautious. Paranoid is better. Yes, absolutely. Rick, I'm going to say I am paranoid about WordPress only because in the years of working with WordPress and helping people out with WordPress technical issues, it's the non-paranoia are the ones that have gotten people in trouble with that. So I would rather be err on the side of being paranoid. So yes, I guess that's a good term for it, Rick. Absolutely. Okay. So let's start out with a couple of things. All of these options here. So you're going to start out when you're building your site is I always recommend write down all the pages that you're going to have first. So you're going to have a home page, an about us page, all of those different pages, but you're going to start here, all pages. Okay. When you first start out with a blank WordPress site, it's sometimes going to have a home page. Depending on what theme that you install, it might have some pre-installed pages. Okay. As you hover all of these, it's going to give you some additional options. So let's say I installed a new theme, for example, which is a template of the website, and I didn't want a rates page, for example. There's a couple of things that I can do with it. I can just trash it. If I trash it, it takes it out of our menu, but it doesn't take it away completely. Okay. It's still located in this bin. So if I'm going through all of these and creating pages and moving things around and I delete something by accident, it's not the end of the world. But say I wanted to go in and make sure, yeah, I don't want that page, and I can always recreate it from scratch, for example, I can go in here and I can permanently delete it. Okay. When you're walking through WordPress for the first time, I would say, honestly, be cautious but also try to break it. Just by clicking on things, you're not going to break this. And I think this is one of the biggest things that I run into with people that I work with that are working with WordPress. They're afraid to go over and click on appearance, for example, or they're afraid to go in and click on settings. If you just click on it, you're not going to break it. If you delete something and delete it permanently, yeah, there's a good chance you might break something, or you might do something that's unrecoverable. But the good thing about WordPress is it will generally ask you, are you sure you really, really want to do this? Which is, I like that. Okay. So in this particular case, if I hover over this again, I can restore this. If I restore it, I bring it back into my main menu of pages. I can delete it permanently. Okay. I can also do a couple of other things. I can click on this. So say you had a whole bunch of pages, for example, you wanted to delete. I could go up here and go to bulk actions, and then I could delete them all at the same time. Okay. Any questions about any of that so far? Okay. So let's go back to all pages. Okay. So creating a new page is pretty easy. So if I've got up here, I've got add new page. Okay. And what it's going to do is it's going to bring me to a new page. So in this particular case, I've got, let's use the default editor. This is what a new page looks like. Okay. And I can add a title, let's just go blah, 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 and I can type in content for here. Okay. This plug right here, this plus sign up here, gives me the option to do a whole lot of additional things. You can use block builders like Divi or Elementor, but the Gutenberg editor is a block builder in itself. So before installing one of those other block builders, you might want to see if Gutenberg gives you the options that you need, because when I click on this, you're going to see, and it will probably take us probably several hours to go through all of this. So I don't want to go through all of that because we have a lot of other things to cover. But the Gutenberg editor gives you an awful lot of options of things to see. So as you can see, I'm scrolling and I'm scrolling and I'm scrolling and I'm scrolling, and there's a lot in there. Okay. Diane asks, is your Divi Builder a plugin? Use it instead of Elementor. So Divi Builder, there's two different Divi builders. There's Divi itself, which is an actual theme, and then there's the Divi plugin. The Divi plugin is basically a block builder that exists in a theme that you've installed. The Divi theme itself has a lot of customization and page templates within it. So it's kind of the same thing, but it's not quite the same. I think the difference between the two of them in terms of how is Divi Builder different than a Divi theme is Divi theme gives you a lot of pre-installed options for themes versus the Divi Builder is basically just lets you build blocks between that. Okay. And Michael, I'll address that question near the end. Okay. So the one thing to remember when you're doing text, for example, in all of this, okay, anytime you want to get to home base, you're just going to click this view pages and it's going to bring you back. Now you're going to see a little pop-up at the screen that says, hey, you didn't save this. So do you want to save this or not? Okay. In this particular case, maybe I want to just save the draft. So I'm going to go up here and I'm not going to hit publish because maybe I'm not ready. Maybe this is live already. I'm just going to hit save draft first. Oops, cancel and then save draft. And then any editing that I have done within this is going to be saved in that. Okay. And I had mentioned that's the nice thing about WordPress is the fact that if you don't save something, it will generally ask you, don't forget to save this, or are you sure you want to do this? Okay. This Yoast SEO box is not going to show up typically. Let me get rid of this. It's only because I have the plugin for Yoast search engine optimization installed on that. So I just got rid of it so it doesn't take the page up. Okay. It's kind of like everything else, just like Facebook, just like Instagram, just like a lot of the online platforms that are out there. The logo up at the top left is always kind of how you get back to home base. Okay. And Richard says, I have way more posts than pages. This is the reverse of what should happen. How should I turn my pages into posts and vice versa? Okay, Richard, I'll get to that actually when I get to the posts, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. A couple of the things that I want to kind of point out to you is let's go back to this one. So, and I deliberately put this in here kind of because you can see it's gobbledygook. When I go back here to edit, okay, I want you to keep in mind something, okay? I'm going to hit publish, okay? And what would happen if I hit publish is my page title is going to be this, okay? It's going to say forfangmedia.com, VNBC, CN, blah, 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 blah. You just want to make sure whatever your page title is, that it matches something. So I want to say find us, for example, okay? Before I actually hit publish, because then when I hit publish, it's going to say forfangmedia.com / find us instead. Okay. That's important. if you make a mistake, for example, you have a typo in it, you want to change the name of that, just be cognizant of that. There's a lot of old style websites out there where you might see it say, widgets.com/001. You just want to be careful that you don't name your pages like that, because that's not good for search engine optimization. I don't want to get into an off-topic search engine optimization thing, but just make sure that whatever your page titles are match what the URL is going to be. Okay. Now, I want to go into a couple of things that are very, very simplified, but I think are important to remember. Is one, if you add a link, for example, there's a couple of different ways that you can add it. You can actually type in, let me close this up. So there's a couple of different ways you can add links. I've kind of got mixed feelings about how you want to do it. For example, see, when I'm typing the URL, it's going to say, do I want to embed this? Which means that it is going to become a hot link. So if I click embed, for example, and let me get rid of these. Okay. Oops. I'm just going to start from scratch for a second, reload. Okay, so if I hit this and I hit embed, it's supposed to bring this back into, it's going to put this into, oh, okay, see, it says the restore the backup. So my apologies about that. This is why I'm not as familiar, unfortunately, with the Gutenberg editor as the regular one. But when you add a link, you just want to make sure, and let me use this for an example. See up here, when you highlight something, when you click a link and it says search or type URL, I'm going to put that in here. Okay. I can hit enter and it's going to create a link to it. So when this page is live, for example, and someone clicks on this, it's going to go to score.org. Okay. The one thing that's important is if you are linking to something that is offsite, for example, you want to make sure that people aren't leaving your website. And that's important because, I mean, people have a short attention spans. So what's going to happen is, you talked about Score, for example, or you said, oh, this presentation needed some help, and you referenced something, and you directed them to a Score site. It's the link doesn't open in a new window. What's going to happen is people are going to go away from your website, for example, and they're not going to come back because they're going to get distracted looking at this, and then they'll go to Facebook and they never come back. Okay. The one thing to remember is you want to go in here and then go into advanced and go here, open in a new tab, which means that any link that you've put into your website, for example, doesn't take people away from the website. The only time that you don't want to do this is if you're doing something called internal linking. So for example, you wrote a blog post and you wanted to reference your services page. Then you don't want it to open a new tab. You want people to generally bounce back and forth within the website. Okay. These two things, the search engines should ignore this link, mark as no follow, is really only something that you want to use if you don't want the page to show up in Google search. It doesn't mean that it won't at some point. That's a whole separate conversation in itself. Okay. This is a sponsored link or advertised marked as sponsored. This is something that you would want to use if you start getting into affiliate advertising. The FTC actually has regulations and rules on affiliate advertising, and this is something that you would want to check if you were doing that. Okay. And Diane says, how do I move a hyperlink placed on the wrong page? Diane, do you mean a hyperlink like that needs to, the link needs to go somewhere else directly? Or is it linked to something wrong, something that's not where you want it to go, or you just want to move it to a different page? Okay. That's kind of the basics of that. Let me go back to one of these, for example, and I want to talk about HTML. When I want to type in something like this, for example, I can type directly in here. When people are designing websites for the first time, a lot of times they'll put their content into Microsoft Word, for example, or Google Docs or another editor. And what will happen is it will when you cut and paste from Microsoft Word, for example, it will copy the formatting. And what will happen is it will screw the formatting up on your website. So when I found if you're going to write your content up in Microsoft Word, I know there's a setting in there that says strip formatting out. It doesn't strip formatting out. What you really want to do is, if you're going to write it in Microsoft Word, write it in Microsoft Word, copy it into Notepad, because Notepad will strip all that formatting out, and then paste it into the editor. And that will make sure that there is absolutely no formatting in there. Okay, so for example, if you took this, for example, and you wanted to change this, and I hope this answers your question, Diane. If this goes to the wrong one, when I hit edit, okay, it's going to give me the opportunity. So maybe like the said score.com, for example, it would give me the ability to change that. Okay, I hope that's what you meant. Okay. Okay. The other thing, actually, one more one that I wanted to demonstrate to you is when you type, for example, you might find that there's some extra spacing in there. WordPress has a little bit of a weird glitch in it, so that if you type and you hit return, see how there's an extra space? Okay. So if I type and I want it to wrap right around, I'm going to hit shift and enter, and it's going to go right underneath it. That's one thing that I found that a lot of people end up with kind of having an issue with, because they're like, where is there all this extra spacing in there? Okay. No, not the question I need answered. Sorry. Okay. So Diane, if you don't mind, we can maybe go back to that at the end. And if you want to unmute and explain a little bit better, that would be helpful. Okay. I'm just going to hit save draft. Okay. And then I'm going to go into, let's go into contact us. And at the last session, I talked about making sure that photos were properly resized. Okay. Now, this ties into search engine optimization, but it also it ties into page loading. Okay. And it means that, have you ever gone onto a website, for example, where you're on the website, maybe you have high-speed internet and the page is taking a long time to load? Okay. Sometimes it's because it's what the website was built with, but other times it's because the photos itself are big. And if you don't think about that from the perspective of when you're building your website, this can run into a lot of issues. One, your page itself is going to load very slowly. And two, Google and Bing and Yahoo and the other search engines are going to penalize you because the page loads. Okay. From a marketing perspective too, I have high speed internet. If I'm a customer and I'm on somebody's website and it's taking a minute or even 2 minutes to load up, I'm impatient. I generally, unless I'm really curious and really want to know the info there, if it's taking too long to load, I'm going to go somewhere else. So you want to make sure that your photos, for example, are compressed, which means it could be a big photo that you're looking at, and it's not actually resized to be smaller. It just means that it's compressed down so it's smaller in file size. Okay. I wanted to show you a quick way to do this that was easy to do if you had a lot of pictures to resize. Okay. And if you can see this particular picture, for example, when I hover over this, is 1.72 megabyte, which means it's humongous. This one, for example, is 1.63 megabyte, which is also huge. Okay. This one, for example, is almost 8 megabytes. If I loaded this picture up as is into my WordPress site, it's probably going to take a really long time to load up if somebody is viewing my site. So what I want to do is I don't want to make the file, or I don't want to make the photo itself smaller. I just want to minimize the file size. Okay. A good file size is under 0.5 kilobyte. Okay. There's a couple of easy ways to do this. Okay. So I'm going to go to Canva, for example, and you can do this if you have a Canva account, a free or a paid Canva account. Okay. Free version is really all you need to use if you're going to batch resize pictures. Okay. There's also another website called Fast Stone Photo Resizer. It is a download. I think it's PC and Mac now. And what you can do is you can batch resize photos. I try not to recommend downloadable programs unless I know for a fact that they're very safe. I've used that one personally for many years, and I always go and I try to vet those. What that particular program will also do is, if you have photos that you're concerned about copyright, it will also let you put a watermark in them too. Okay. But an easy way to batch resize things is to, fast stone photo resizer. Okay. So for example, let's say I want to have my photos, for example, in my website be on average, and this is kind of an average, is say 750 by, let's say 400. Okay. And I think you can kind of play around with the dimensions depending on how you want your website to look. But say I want most of my pictures on my website to be this size. Okay. It's going to give you a couple of options when you're in Canva. One is pixels or inches, millimeters, or centimeters. We're going to go with pixels because that's kind of the standard for that. And I'm going to go create a new design. Now, in this particular case, let's go to uploads, and I'm going to take those two files right here, and I'm going to insert them. Okay. Now, say I wanted to do a whole bunch of pictures, for example. Okay. And I want them all to be the same size. The nice thing about Canva is you can kind of edit them like this, for example. Okay. Now, say I wanted to download this particular picture. Okay. If I download this one right here, and I go back to my photos and I look at this photo, see it's a 510 kilobytes. So it's actually a really, really good size for me to upload that. Okay. So I find it useful if you have a whole bunch of photos that you're going to add and edit, for example, to do this in Canva, because it will make your life a lot simpler and it will automatically compress those pictures, for example. Okay. I had mentioned talking about copyright, for example, in the past session. This is Pixabay, for example, and Pixabay has free stock photos. The one thing that I found about using photos in your website design is if you are using photos on a commercial standpoint, please don't use free stock photo sites, for example. And in terms of the size, so pixels, if 750 pixels is going to be about half a page of width on a website, for example. If you're looking for the amount of resolution, for example, that you want to upload, less than 500 kilobytes, if you can get it down even more, that's great. There's a couple of other pages, and no, so you don't need to make it smaller. Yep, just download it and it automatically gets smaller automatically. Okay. The one thing to just be careful of, so if you want high definition photos, and because we're on this topic, high definition photos are going to slow down your website speed, and that's not something that you want to use. You can make the photo huge, you can make it go across the whole website, you can make it like really, really in depth and bright. For example, and I'll give you an example of this. We had used this picture just as an example. If I wanted to download this, I particularly wouldn't want to use this commercially because I don't know if this is actually copyrighted or not. It says it's a free photo, but I'm always paranoid, to use Rick's word about that, because I found copyrighted photos in most of the free stock photo sites that are out there. Okay. So you can see here, it's going to give me some examples. This is 640 by 423 pixels. Okay. That's a pretty good size for a website. For example, you could actually make that a little bit bigger in the website without actually losing the resolution or it getting pixelated or fuzzy. This one, would be a good size, and then you could make it smaller. Anything bigger than this, though, this is going to slow the website down. This one, 9.3 megabytes, would make it really, really slow. Okay. Just be careful too, if you're using some of these, for example, see in Pixabay, see over here, it says if you want to purchase a commercial license, please go to Shutterstock. So this is actually a photo that's licensed on Shutterstock. And this is kind of where I was saying, this is where you can find copyrighted photos, but this person is nice because they're letting us know about that. Sometimes, people might take photos from another site and upload them as their own. I've come across that too. The copyright's a very, very tough issue when you're dealing with websites, because if this picture, for example, had a digital watermark, say this was a Getty photo, for example, you would not be able to physically see the watermark in that. Okay. And the one thing that I'm going to use that word paranoid again, only because I've run into so many people that have run into copyright issues with using photos that they thought were free, but that had digital watermarks on them. So please be careful, buy your pictures legally. They don't have to cost much. I had mentioned this before. Shop around on the stock photo sites. A lot of commercial photographers will upload the same photos to multiple sites, and you can find it at a variety of different places. So if you find one on Shutterstock, for example, go check Big Stock Photo, for example, because they might have the same photo with the same photographer for a lot less money, and it's still legal. That's just how stock photographers make their money. Okay, also read the terms of service too. There's a lot of copyrighted photos on Flickr, for example. Creative Commons does not always necessarily protect you from getting a copyright claim. Okay. And this, I'm going to pop on this one. Michael asked, after downloading photos, be it free or paid, is there a way we can upload photos and it will identify any hidden watermarks we missed? So if you have Photoshop, the expensive version of that, there is a module in there that will check for copyrights. I have found that it doesn't always do that. Your best bet is to actually do this. There's a site called tineye.com. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload this particular photo. I think it was this one that had been said it was copyright. Okay. The best way to, this is one of the best sites out there. It's free for checking things. And so you can see this is on Shutterstock. It's on Adobe. It's hopefully they bought some licenses for this. In this particular case, it's on Medium. Okay. But this will tell you pretty much right off the bat whether it is in use somewhere. You can also do reverse Google image search, but I found that 50% of the time it doesn't catch that. Okay, so just please make sure you're legal about that. I just want to make sure that businesses don't get hit with copyright claims. Okay, all right, so let's go back to this. And Kate, yes, you can check the size of the photos already in your website. Did I talk about Lighthouse last time at all? And I think even if I did,
I think you did. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll talk about it again. Okay, let me just make a note and I'll touch on that at the end. Because I don't want to derail myself too much because I go into squirrel mode. All right, so I want to go into let's go back here. I want to show you something again. Okay. Okay. So for example, these are the links that I currently have public on my page. Now, let's say I wanted to make this rooms page, for example, a drop down under the policies, or I wanted to move it around. What I want to show you is how to edit that. Okay. So when I go back here, okay, again, here's all the links on the left. If I go down to appearance and then I go to menus, okay, I'm going to see some things in here. Now, you're going to see, if you remember a little while back, I deleted that rates page, but it is still in my menu, okay? If I go back up here, it's not showing because it actually deleted it, but my menu is still showing that. So what I want to do is I want to go into this, and I just want to hit remove, okay? Now, if I want to make, let's see the policies, for example, I want to make it a subheader of that. All I'm going to have to do is drag this over a little bit, okay? And then I'm going to hit save, okay? And if we go back to the home page and we hit refresh, okay, now this is a drop down of this, okay? So the same thing too, I like the menu options in here because it's drag and drop. So say I wanted to move things around and make this in a different order. Maybe I wanted to do the blog first, and then I wanted to do contact us here. Same thing, just don't forget to hit save because I think that's where it hitches people up a bit. And then when I go here and I hit refresh, see how it's going to rearrange things, okay? So a couple of things in here when you add a new page. So say I added 3 more pages, it's not automatically going to show up in my menu, okay? It's going to show up here, or I'm going to click view all. Okay, and I want to show you an example of that. I'm going to go back here and go all pages. And actually I did add an extra one. So let's go back here to menus and then view all policy rooms. Let's add policies again, add to menu, and it's going to add it again. Okay. So anytime you add something new, for example, it should end up over here. Okay. Excuse me. Now, the one thing that I get asked commonly is I want a page in either a main menu or a submenu to go somewhere else. So let's pretend that I'm the score.org main site, for example, and I want to have a submenu that goes off-site. So I want to have a drop down that goes to Minnesota score, and I want to have a drop down that goes to my score site, for example. You're not going to see this right away. Okay. This is something that you're going to have to go up here and go to screen options right here, and you're going to say link target. Okay. What this is going to do is this is going to give you some additional options. Okay. So if I want to add a new page, for example, okay, I'm going to see posts and I'm going to see custom links. And then it's going to give me the option to go in here and go like this. Add to menu. Okay. So now I have this new menu item in here that's a custom link, and I can title it. I could say score.org, and I can also say, just like linking to something that's offsite, I can say open link in a new tab. And then again, don't forget to hit save. Okay, so now when I go back here, and again, I hit refresh, okay, see how it shows up exactly as I put it in there. And when I click on this, see how it opens up in a new tab, so it doesn't take things away from the site itself. Okay. Now there's a couple of other things to remember. This is your primary menu. So this is the menu that's in the top bar. You can have some additional menus. Okay. Different themes have different options, but usually you can have a menu at the top and you can have a menu at the very, very bottom too. Okay. You're going to edit those in different places. So if I see select a menu to edit, for example, there's a secondary menu, and that could be, for example, this is the Divi Builder. So it means that I can add a top level menu up here too. And depending on the theme, I can also add a bottom menu. So I can have different pages that are going to show up in different places throughout the site. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody so far? Okay. All right, not seeing anything, any comments that says this. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about blog posts, for example. And no, Michael, in terms of the menu structures, it's not just Divi. Different themes have different options. I haven't worked with Elementor in a little while, but I believe Elementor, for example, gives you that ability too. But I've seen different themes have different options to do menus on the top, have some have menus on the side, for example. Divi, for example, it gives you on the left-hand side. Sometimes I have them on the bottom. Okay. The regular WordPress editor allows for it though. Well, so there is no really regular WordPress editor itself because you need a theme, Michael. You need to have something installed. WordPress editor is kind of like just the framework of the house, so just the wood. There's nothing around it. You actually need a theme integrated onto that. Okay. And Esther says, can you address H1, H2, H3? Yes, and absolutely, I can do that. And let me go, I'm just going to go in to, for example, plugins, just so I'm not holding people up, because it's going to be the same structure whether you're using Gutenberg or whether you're using the traditional editor. And because I'm personally more comfortable, I would say, using classic editor, I'm going to switch back to that. And this is only for the purpose of being able to show you a couple of things and not make you go, oh, wait, let me go back here, for example. Okay. Now, posts is a blog post, for example. So if you see over here, okay, see there's blog. When you add things to blog posts, they're consecutive. And I want to show you a couple of examples of that. When I go in here to go to posts, okay, when you first install WordPress, it's always going to say hello world. Okay, just go ahead and delete that. Just trash it because it's basically just a placeholder. Okay, this is some text that I posted in recently from a blog post that I recently added. Okay, and if I want to go in here, I can edit it, but I want to show you a couple of things really quickly. And this goes into goes into how blog posts will look consecutively versus how a page is going to look. Okay. You're going to do the same process for adding a post as you're going to do for adding a page. You're going to go in here to add new post. Okay. And see that the layout's a little bit different. This is the text version. And again, I personally, this is definitely a personal thing, so please don't be swayed by this. If you're curious, flip back and forth between the two. Use the one you feel the most comfortable with. They do the same things. They just look a little bit different. Okay. I use the visual editor in this particular case. Okay. And let's see, I'm going to go in and say, let's use this as the topic of a blog post. Okay, so this is going to be my blog title. Okay, so similar to a page title, this is going to be the title of my blog. And then I'm going to paste this in, for example. Okay. Okay, see how it gets a little wonky? That is me directly pasting from Microsoft Word without being in a text editor. Okay, to bypass this, if you're using the classic editor, and there is a way to do this in Gutenberg too, you can hit text. This is the base HTML. So if I click this, it's going to paste exactly as I have it in my Word document. Okay. And you can space it out a little bit in here. Now see where I go back to visual, it's pasting it exactly as I had in my Word document. Okay. Now there's a couple of things you can do in here. You can use keyboard controls, or you can use the editor. So for example, if you're using on a PC, you could go Control B, for example, and it would bold it. Okay. Now say I wanted to link this to, I'm just going to type this in and say volunteer onboarding checklist. And I'll go back to that in a second, and as there, okay. And I want to link this. Okay. I'm going to go here. This is a Google Doc that I want to share. So I'm going to hit share, and I'm going to copy this link. Okay. And when I go back here, I can do this. I can go volunteer onboarding checklist, and I can go up here to insert edit link. Okay. Now, when I do that, it's going to give me the ability to paste directly in here. Okay. And I hit apply. Okay. Now, I had mentioned this a couple of minutes ago. If I do this and I hit publish, what's going to happen is when somebody clicks on that link, they're going to go away from my page. So I want to make sure I go back in and I edit this. Okay. This is a little bit different. Link options, though, and you're going to see the same thing. Open link and into tab. Okay. And then you're going to hit update. Okay. I personally, from the perspective of website compliance and specifically ADA website compliance, I always make sure that my links are underlined, and I make sure that they're bright blue. They don't have to be bright blue. There's nothing in ADA website compliance that says they have to be bright blue. But keep in mind, you don't want your links to be red or green. Okay. Part of ADA website compliance means that if people that are colorblind can't see your site, for example, and they can't understand that this is a hot link or a link to go somewhere else, that's making it non-ADA compliant. And let me kind of give you an example of this. So I'm going to non-underline that, and I'm going to make all of my text color the same. Okay. Now this is still a link. Okay. When I hit publish, okay, and I go over to what's called the permalink. So this is how it's going to show up. Okay. See, this isn't, you don't know, nobody knows that this is a hot link. Even if it's not ADA website compliant, if I don't have it in a different color and it's not underlined, how would somebody know? Even if you said, click here to do this, it's not user friendly, for example. So you would just want to make sure that if you were going to put links in, that you made them so that it was obvious that it was a link itself. Again, I tend to underline all of my links, and I make sure that they're bright blue, because that's kind of the universally recognizable way to see things. Okay. Now I'm going to hit update in this. Okay. And Michael asked, and I'm going to address this one because this is relevant to this. If one switches back between Classic Editor and Gutenberg Editor, I do it all the time. Honestly, I've never actually found any issues between the two. And then they use the Elementor or Elementor Pro. Michael, if you asked me that question about Divi, I would know I've used Elementor before, but not recently, so I don't know if it would screw it up. I don't think it would though, because I know Elementor, the block builder, has been pretty well proofed to make sure that it's user friendly and bulletproof, if you want to call it that. Okay. I'm going to go back to here. Okay. And this is a draft. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go edit. Okay. And I want to address a couple of other things. You have these same options in the Gutenberg editor. If you're doing a blog, for example, you want to make sure that two things are filled out. Okay. One is called categories and the other is called tags. Okay. In this particular case, because this is a fresh website, this is my test website that I get to play around with, I don't have any categories. When you're doing blogs are fantastic for search engine optimization. WordPress actually started out as a blog platform before, some website designers said, wow, we can use this for websites and do all these customizable things with it. This is important to do from the perspective of it's very, very good for search engine optimization to put categories and tags in it. And it's very, very good for navigation. So if someone is coming to your business website, for example, they can actually go through your website. And if they're interested in volunteering, for example, or if they're interested in onboarding, for example, it means that they would be able to click on something and automatically see all of the blog posts that were in this particular category or tagged with this particular thing. Okay. And so a couple of high level things is the categories. So let's pretend you have a widget business, because I think that's my favorite example. And you sell blue widgets, yellow widgets, red widgets, green widgets, fluorescent widgets. Okay. So a category would be a blue widgets, a category would be red widgets, a category would be, fluorescent widgets, for example. And then say you sold your widgets at farmers markets and online and e-commerce and all of these other things. A high level category is kind of an overview of topics. So to give you an example of this, if you had a restaurant website, a category would be specials, a category would be drinks, for example, or beverages, a category might be wine, for example. They're kind of high level topics. And then tags are specifics within this. So tags might be to use food as an example. If I had a category that was spices, a tag might be the recipes talking about rosemary in it, and it's talking about frying something. Those are some tags that are specific to the text and the content in the blog post itself. Okay. So think of categories as being high level and tags as kind of being specific descriptors of what the content and the text that's in the post itself. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? And anybody have any questions about that? Okay. All right, good. Okay, so I'm going to publish this particular one. Okay, and the reason I want to do this, and let me actually put a couple of categories and tags just so I can show you. You can add a new category, and then you can hit, let's say, artificial intelligence. That might be a good one. Add a new category, and after you've added a bunch of ones, you won't have to retype them every single time. As you add more blogs, they will all show up in here. So let's say score. Okay. And then when you add a new blog post, it will automatically give you those options. And you can just check whatever ones that are relevant. Okay. Tags are going to be the same thing. Let me go back here actually for a second. Categories. So your primary category is going to be, let's say you have 5 different things that you categorized it in. Okay. I personally have not found that making one primary over the other makes any difference in search engine optimization. I'm sure that there are search engine optimization experts out there that will disagree with me. And if for you want to figure out whether this is so or not, I'm not an SEO expert. I am a self-taught, very, very good amateur at this. The other thing about search engine optimization and online marketing is you can talk to 30 different people that are experts in the field, and a lot of them unfortunately don't agree with each other. So you kind of, I think, have to kind of take it from the perspective of if you really want to test which one and if it makes any difference, is look at your analytics that's in there, and see if it's making a difference or not. I don't typically make one primary, and I haven't, I have tested this myself personally. I have not found that it makes much of a difference or any difference at all. But again, that's a personal observation. Okay. Brenda asks, is there a limitation on number of tags? So I have not found, and that's a really good question. I don't know that. I don't think there's a amount of tags that is a limit on there. I know Rick might know that, but I would say that you don't want to go over probably 10 to 15. Generally, the amount of tags for a blog post is under 10. I've seen most blog posts, I think, typically have 5 to 7. I think that the problem is if you start getting really, really granular, and you could say, let's use the context of this post. A subtopic or a tag might be volunteers, for example. It might be SCORE. It might be recruiting and retaining, for example. It might be nonprofits. But nonprofits, if my business is nonprofits, for example, nonprofit, if I'm using it a lot, might be an actual category. So you want to just make sure, because things like this, outline, for example, is not a tag. Expectations is not a tag. Expectations are really more like nouns, or directives that are in there. Things like bullet points, for example, is not a tag. You want to make sure that whatever you're referencing in the post is an actual, if that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to hit update. Okay, and I'm going to go back here. Okay, and then I'm going to go to blog. Okay, and see how these are consecutive. So these are separate pages. This is basically just giving me kind of a subheader that's here. If I click into this, for example, it's going to give me all of the text. Okay, I know there was some questions earlier in chat about the fact that their posts are showing up as, or their content is showing up as blog posts rather than pages itself. And I think that's just a question of, you have to go back over here. And what you can do is go into, if you've added things in posts, just go in here, for example, and just hit copy. Even if you have an image that's uploaded, and just go over and create a new page with it. And so say I wanted to, add a new page on volunteering. Okay. I would just make sure that I add that, and then I hit publish. Okay. And then I would go back and I would make sure that it's showing up in my menu. So I would go back to menus and see now how this new page is showing up, but it's not showing up in the menu unless I actually add it. So I'm going to click on here, and then I'm going to go add to menu. And then I'm going to say, oh, let's put this right over here. Or maybe it's a subheader. Okay. And again, just save menu. Okay. And then I always make sure that you test it, so go back, refresh your page, and make sure that it's actually showing up there, for example. So here I've got the drop down, I've got volunteering. Okay. The other thing I want to touch on in terms of posts, businesses don't have to blog. This is a personal opinion, and I know I've started to sound like a broken record already, but again, marketing, there's a lot of different differentiations between what is good for marketing. But what I have seen from a decade of working with online marketing is blog posts are very, very good for search engine optimization. When you build your website, and I mentioned this before, I think in another session, is Google will come along and look at your website and go, oh, look, content. Okay. And then if you don't change it, and you don't fairly change it up a lot, Google kind of just, they don't ignore it, but they don't look at it all the time. Okay. Anytime you post a blog post is, Google gets excited about it, like, oh, look, fresh content. And so you can actually track, when you have analytics installed on your website, the fact that when you track it, sometimes you're not getting traffic right away, but as Google and Bing and Yahoo and the other search engines pick it up, that will help your search engine optimization organically without you having to spend any money on anything. Okay. The one thing that I just wanted to mention is you do have the ability to turn off comments on here. And this is important. And this is a question. And Michael, I'll get to your question in a second. This is important from the perspective of, and I get this a lot when people ask me about blogs, is do I want to enable blog comments? So yes, you do, but you want to have them moderated. So it means that, unfortunately, there are spammers out there that will spam your blog post when sometimes with some not so user friendly and not so, work friendly, text and links. But you want to make sure that they're moderated. Okay. But you also want to make sure that, some people might come along to your blog post and make insightful comments, or they might be potential customers and clients. But I always recommend that you allow blog posts on your comments, or allow comments on your blog posts, but just make sure that you look at them first before you hit publish so that you have the ability to weed those out. Okay, there is a plugin that I always install called a Kismet. Typically, when you install WordPress for the first time, this actually comes kind of standard in your plugin options. Activating it just helps cut down on the amount of spam that's in there. And Michael says, no, I have not found that anything breaks when you do that. Okay. Especially when you're building it. It's only when you're switching themes over that things tend to break. I know I mentioned this at the last session, is just be careful when you first start building your website. Just make sure you find a theme that you like, just because if you put a lot of content and other things in there, you might find if you switch themes and you've put a whole lot of work into it, it might like screw the website up. Sometimes things don't carry over. That's the only time that I've really found to break things. Okay. I do want to touch too on ADA a little bit. ADA website compliance is something that you do need to have your website in purveyance of. So you do need to make sure it's not a federal regulation yet, but at some point, there's been legislation pending for the last, I think, 5 years to make all businesses be ADA website compliant. And, the government just instituted something fairly recently that said government, and I think it's educational sites, must now currently be ADA compliant. It's coming. Okay. I always look at it from the perspective of marketing. We want to make sure that our websites are accessible by anyone, everybody, because everybody's a customer. But also, we don't want ADA lawsuits that are out there. There's a lot of frivolous lawsuits and some serious lawsuits out there that people can't get to people's websites because they want to buy a product or use a service. So we just want to make sure that it's as accessible as possible to everybody. Okay. Now, if you haven't heard about GDPR, GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation, and that oversees privacy data protection. Now, if you're not doing business with people that are overseas, people are like, well, why do I have to do that? I'm in the US and I don't have any customers in the UK, for example. Something to be aware is that there's a lot of states in the United States that have data privacy regulations already. California, for example, has a pretty stringent one. And I think there's 5 or 6 other states currently have laws, and a lot of other ones are enabling them. So here in New Hampshire, for example, we actually have legislation pending on that. Canada has their own privacy regulations too. It basically means that you have a statement on your website that says, this is what we're doing with your information. If you give us your name, your contact information, your email address, for example, this is what we're going to do with it. We're not going to sell it. Maybe we will sell it, but you have to give that in the statement. Okay. There should be a privacy policy on your website. Most of the time, people put it at the bottom of the page, so in the very footer of it. ADA compliance is also known as an accessibility policy. And in my opinion, you should have an accessibility policy on your website. And what that does is it gives people an alternative way to contact you. So, for example, if someone was using your website and they were using a screen reader and they couldn't use a portion of your website, the ADA accessibility statement gives the opportunity for somebody to call you or email you and say, well, I can't access this. I need the information. How are you going to give it to me? And Ezra says, can anyone provide ADA compliant resources? Yes, and I've got a ton of compliance resources that I would be happy to share as well, if that's helpful. Okay, let's see some of the other things. Oh, I wanted to show you Lighthouse too. Let me go into, can anybody give me an example of a site that they would like me to run Lighthouse on? And Lighthouse is basically testing for SEO. It's testing for internet accessibility and ADA accessibility, and also load time. South Eagle cleaning. Okay. All right. So this is something that you can only do in Google Chrome. And I think did we were on this one last time, I think. Okay. So when I go here, okay, so I'm in Google Chrome and I'm going to click on this, okay, and I'm going to go down the three little dots. I'm going to go down here to more tools, okay, and then I'm going to go over to something called developer tools, okay. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to give me a bunch of different options that I can run my site through. And I always recommend when you're first starting out in business, do this, run all of these different tests on this because this will help your website. Don't do them, you can check them all at once, but what happens is it takes a really long time for the report to run, and also you end up with a whole lot of information. It's easier to go, let's run a search engine optimization test, for example, and you just hit analyze page load. This is free. This is easy to do. You can also, if you don't see that in your Google menu, just actually go to Google and go Google Lighthouse or Lighthouse Google, and it will actually bring you to this. Okay. What's going to happen is when you run a search engine optimization test, it's going to give you some things in here that it's going to say, this will help you get to 100% search engine optimization. Okay. Links are not crawlable. So if you touch down in here, it's going to specifically give you which one, because it may not be applicable to everything. For example, if you have a photo on your website and maybe you have 12, and I'll go back to getting back to Lighthouse, Kate, in just a sec. If you have 12 pictures on your website and it says, photos don't have alt tags, so they don't have those descriptions in them, it's going to specifically give you, say, let's pretend for a second that it's going to say photo does not have alt tags. If you click on the drop down, it's going to give you which particular photo doesn't have that alternate tag. Okay, we had talked about this last time, which in the context of when you add photos, and I'll actually go over this again in a second, just how to add alt tags to a photo. Okay, this is a big part of search engine optimization, and it also is a big part of ADA website compliance. Okay, so let me close this up again. And for Kate and anybody else that missed it, I'm going to go here to the three dots. Okay. Well, so the thing is, Michael, if I maximize it too much, you're not going to get the pop out over there. Let me go here to developer tools again. Okay. And if I enlarge this a lot, unfortunately, nothing on here is really going to get bigger, Michael. So my apologies for that. Okay. I would just go through and run all of these one at a time. This does not run through your whole website. This only runs through a page at a time. So if you have 50 pages, it's going to take you a little bit while because you'll have to go to the service page. You'll have to go to the contact us page. Okay. Each of these reports that will give you some information about helping to maximize and helping to, make your search engine optimization better, make your ADA website compliance better. Performance, for example, you can see how fast your page is loading. Just out of curiosity, let's run this. And in some cases, there's not a lot you can do about it. You might find as you start using WordPress, there are some themes that will load better and some that don't. And what I always recommend is if you're kind of exploring some themes, if you can find another website, for example, that has that particular theme installed, run a site test on it, run a performance test on it. And if the performance test itself is really slow, that might be a website theme that you want to stay away from. Okay. So an 85% performance actually isn't bad. But if you go into this, see where it says largest content paint or contentful paint. Okay. This is where it's kind of getting stuck. It means that when you scroll down, this is not going to mean much for most things, but see this where it says properly sized images. Okay. If I click down on this, it's going to give me some examples, for example, of a couple of images on the page that I could actually probably compress some more to make the page load quicker. From the perspective of most of the rest of the stuff is not going to mean much to a developer. And honestly, there's not that much you can do about it. But this will help tell you whether there's some photos in your website that you can compress some more. Okay. Does that help a little bit? Okay. Let me go back here because I do want to talk about inserting photos again and talking about alt tags because that is very important. Okay. If I go in here to edit, okay, I have a couple of different options if I'm going to add photos. I can click here to add media. Okay. This is the image that we loaded up the other day. I'm going to add yet another one. So I'm going to go here to upload files. Okay. And I'm going to use, let's see, this one, because I actually used this recently in a blog post. Okay. And I'm going to upload it. Now it's going to give me some information about this. Okay. Let me zoom in a little bit and see if I can make the text a little bit bigger. Okay. So this image is labeled 5.jpg. Okay. It's 193 kilobytes, which is actually a really, really good compressed size for a photo, which means that when I insert this into a blog post, that page is actually going to show up really, really quickly. Okay. But what I want to do is I want to put some alt text in this. So in this particular case, this particular image has a ton of text on it. And this is a hard one. So you're going to want to think about this as you're adding images and photos to this. If you're adding a document that is a picture, you might want to add it as a Microsoft Word document, or suggested you might want to add it as a PDF. This particular image is not ADA website accessible, because in order for me to take all of the text in here to make the alt text truly descriptive, I would have to go into my original image and put everything in there in the alt text. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. The one thing to keep in mind is if you do upload images, and say you have an image on your home page and there's a beautiful picture of a tomato or a widget, and you have text on the picture itself, so it's not plainly readable text. You have text that's like created in Photoshop or Canva, for example, that says this week only 25% off all tomatoes per pound, for example. Okay. That is not readable by Google. And if somebody is using a screen reader, for example, they can't see that. Okay. So what I would do is I would put it, let's pretend this picture, or let's use this one, for example. This is a photo of tomatoes and pasta and basil sitting on a cutting board, for example. Okay. This could be decent alt text for this particular picture. Okay. If I wanted to add it so it was ADA accessible, I would also say text on photo. And there doesn't seem to be a wrong way to put this. I've seen it in a whole bunch of different ways, specifically from people that actually specialize in ADA compliance. I've seen text on a photo. I've seen text overlay. I said, or the text on the photo says this. In this particular case, I would say tomatoes on sale, 25% off this week. Okay. And I would just make sure that anything that's descriptive of the picture is in that alt text. Okay. If I add a caption, it's going to show up under the picture itself. I also might want to change the title to just, tomato photo, just for my own particular reference, just so I know it. The description, the same thing. I like to add alt text, and I typically will take the alt text and I'll put the description in too. This does not show up publicly. Okay. And then I'll hit insert into post. Okay. Let's say you forget to do this. There's a couple of things that you can do once you've inserted into your blog post or inserted into your page. You can double click on it again, and you're going to see some page options, but you're also going to see this, which is edit. Okay. And it's going to give you some alternative text and some advanced options. Okay. The image title attribute, I also like to say, this is a photo of a picture of a tomato, for example, and I also would want to put in, if there was text over it, I would want to put that in there too. Okay, update. The question is there an advantage? Do we need to write the words "this is a photo of," or just writing the photo, the keyword suffice? So you can just write in what the photo is descriptive of. I think my favorite, you don't have to overdo it. I think this is my favorite way to describe this. If you had a picture of a bride standing in a field with a tree behind it, the description could be, young bride standing in a field with a tree behind her. You don't have to put in, well, she's, blonde and she's wearing a cream colored dress with seed pearls and it's the grass is, waist high and the tree is a maple tree. You can. That's just going into a bit more detail than you would actually need to get into. Okay. And then just, again, don't forget to hit update when you do that. Okay. And I think, let's see if I am missing anything that needs to go over. Oh, I do want to go over the media library. Anytime that you've uploaded something, for example, okay, it's going to be found in your media library. So you can click on it. It's going to give you some information. For example, when I click on this, it's going to give me some information about it. And see, I started to type something in and I stopped. I can go in here and I can edit the image. Okay, so these are some things that you can do within the editor itself. I have found that editing offsite, editing it in Photoshop, editing it in Canva, if you're going to use Canva to resize things or create things, is definitely easier. I found the cropping and scaling doesn't always work as well as it should. Please feel free to explore that if you'd like. I've personally found it's easier to do it in a separate program. Okay. Now, say I wanted to go in here and I didn't want to create pages with new files. I wanted to say, okay, I'm creating my website for the first time, and I've got a folder with all of my image, and maybe I want to have a bunch of PDFs to add. Okay, I can start out here with a media library, and I can just go add media file. And just like uploading something to email, for example, or if you're going to add something to Facebook, for example, it's going to ask you to select files. Okay, and then you're just going to hit whatever you want. In this particular case, that new onboarding checklist, I'm going to add that too. Okay, and then I'm just going to hit open, and it's going to upload all of those. Okay, you might find as you use your website, sometimes you might find that you're duplicating photos. Realistically, that's not hurting the website that I have found, but you're also putting something in again that you're already using. So you just might want to, as over the years, I've seen the back ends of websites that have been in business for years and they keep re-uploading the photo over and over again. So I've always kind of found it's best practices to just make sure that you're putting, some descriptors in there so that if you're looking for something for the first time, you can use the search box and say, hey, I'm looking for pictures of tomatoes instead of uploading the same picture of tomatoes 15 times, which I see quite a bit. Okay, so again, just keep in mind all of the things on the left-hand side are going to be changeable depending on what theme you use and depending on what plugins that you have enabled. Okay, does anybody have any questions about anything else? And did I miss any questions that we've been through before? Okay, Diane, thank you. I'll look at that. And Michael says, would uploading a photo with text layout that is not ADA friendly going to lower our SEO because it lowers accessibility? No, because when you run a text, okay, there's two parts to this question. So from a search engine optimization standpoint, no, it should not affect your search engine optimization. Will it affect your ADA score? Yes. Okay. It may not affect it when you run a technical audit. So when there's two different sides to ADA accessibility. There's the technical side, and then there's the physical visual side of this. So you might have a website, for example, that scores 100% web accessibility, but from a visual perspective, it's not, because maybe you have buttons, for example, that are in green, for example. Because those are action buttons, somebody that's colorblind is only going to see a gray button, and there may not be enough resolution between the text on it and the button itself, so they might just see something that's gray. So they won't know that it's clickable. To use the example I used earlier, for example, of the hot link that was the same color that was not underlined as the rest of the text, yes, from a marketing perspective, that's not user-friendly easy either, but from an accessibility standpoint, that would fail a visual ADA audit. A technical ADA audit may not necessarily catch that. Okay, so let's see. Let me go back. And you're welcome, Kate. I'm glad it's helpful. So, Richard, would you like to, can we unmute people, Diane?
Sure. Who would you like
Okay.
to unmute?
So let's start with Diane, because she had asked her question first.
Okay. Go for it, Diane. You're allowed to talk now.
Unmute. Oh. Hi there.
Hi.
So go ahead, Priscilla,
Okay.
ask your question.
So we have an existing website
Okay.
using WordPress, and we
Okay.
are plugging our way through it with your 3
Okay.
classes. Thank you very much.
Sure.
We have already got some hyperlinks on a page, and we're not sure. Actually, a lot of the things that you showed us today may be helpful going through the appearances.
Okay.
We made some hyperlinks on an existing page, and we're not sure how to move those back to where they're actually supposed to go.
Okay. Where they're supposed
That's
to go.
question 1.
Okay.
Would you like the second one?
Mhm.
Okay, we have an existing theme
Mhm.
Is it advisable? This website's about 6 years old.
Mhm.
Is it advisable to change your theme?
Okay.
Or is that going to hurt us on the SEO? Is it going to hurt us on the search engine optimization to change the theme?
Okay, so let me address the theme one first. It should not affect your search engine optimization, first of all, not generally. When you're looking at themes, I would also dig into reviews, because I mean themes are kind of like, they're the outlay of that frame of the house. They change the look and feel of things. Some theme options might be better. The only thing that's going to really hurt your search engine optimization, I would say, is if the theme you installed loads slower than the theme you have currently, because Google will look at that page load speed, and that will be one of the criteria it looks at when for search engine optimization. Generally, when you're looking at new themes, look at the documentation, look at the reviews, because if people have had issues with it before, they'll usually note it in there. The other thing you can also do is, again, try to find some websites that are made with that theme and then run those speed tests, run the performance tests on them, and then you can compare it to your current one. Would you mind sharing the website that you're talking about, just so I can visually understand what you mean?
Let's look at your website.
Sure.
I promise I won't run any tests on it unless you want me
I
to.
have to go in here. It's ambioglobal.com, but I'll text it. I'll email it to you. It's under construction.
Okay, that's okay.
Actually, I had somebody redesign a software. Actually, I was doing ADA compliance for him too. He's a software guy in LA. He's very well known.
Oh, good.
Works with a lot of government websites and stuff as well.
Okay.
He's actually on the ADA compliant website. Anyway, he designed my website.
Okay.
He kind of mirrored it from my old website, but
okay.
So if you look at the page first annual VABF, if you click on that, you're going to see at the bottom of the page, and I actually don't even know how I created this page, although now that I've watched your series, I do. So I think I feel like I can go back in. But at the bottom, you're going to see, and I did see what you were talking about, underlining and in blue, but I have some hyperlinks at the bottom. Why not SumaGrow white papers, and the benefits of SumaGrow? Those should not be on that page. So we want to know
W on there.
Oh, is that what it's in W? So
Anyway.
we want to move those. We would like to move those. So we'd like to know how to do that.
Okay, so I'm just gonna look at what your page is built with.
Look at that. You can go in there and look at all that from over there.
I can't edit it. I can just look at it.
You guys are geniuses. I don't know how I am so computer illiterate. It isn't funny.
That's okay.
I hire everybody to do everything for me.
Okay, and to explain what I'm doing is, so I'm looking at the code, and you can do this on any website. What I'm doing is there's depending on which browser you're using, I'm using Chrome, which doesn't give me a top level menu. If I was using Firefox or Edge or trying to think of one of the Apple and Safari, for example, there would be something up here that says view source or use code.
Oh yeah.
I can't edit this, but this is what the site is built with in the back end. And I can look at what she's using, or for a theme, for example. So you're using Elementor, for example, or I can do something that's actually a lot easier. And I referenced this last time. There's a site called Built With.
Built what?
Built with.
Oh, Built With. Okay.
Yeah, Built With. And free version is all you need. This is probably my favorite site. And what I can do is I can just plug in somebody's website and then just look it up. Okay, so you're using WP Forms, for example, you're using Elementor, so I can see the widgets that you have and the plugins that are using. You have e-commerce. Yep. Let's see, you've got PayPal enabled, you're using WordPress content management system, so there's a bunch of other things that I can see about your site. Again, I can't edit any of this.
Right.
But the one thing that just to keep in mind is, every theme is different, for example. So for example, in some themes, this might be part of your main content, but this might be in another option. So when you go into this particular page, if you don't see this right here, do you see my mouse going around? Okay.
Yeah.
When you're going back into your dashboard, look over here to see if there's some additional options, because what I've seen is some themes add additional places to find something. I was in a friend of mine's website the other day, and I don't know who created this, but there was literally this menu was about, it was really, really long. And in order to get to something to edit, like what looked like it should be part of the main page template, was not, you didn't edit it in the page. You actually had to go in here to one of these options and edit it. So if you're not finding that content in there, I would look in here and see, I would just look to see if there's an option on the left-hand side, maybe that, you know, would give you to edit that. I'd be happy to, work with you too and see if I can find it on your site too. If you want to screen share, you can screen share, your screen at some point, not record it.
When can
When?
we do that tomorrow?
I'm gonna put my email in. Yeah, please feel free to reach out to me. This week I'm
Fabulous.
pretty busy, but I'd be happy to set aside a time
Great.
next
Yeah, we're
week.
definitely checking into a score mentor
Okay, good.
for assistance with this. So yes, that would,
Okay.
and that would be great.
All right.
We've got about 4 or 5 small hiccups on there. One of the things that you talked about
Mhm.
was the image checking your
Yep.
Existing photo size. You said you could run your website through and you
Mhm.
can check to see if your photo size needs to be modified. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
And what's that website?
So it's Lighthouse. So let me run through that right again.
Lighthouse.
Let me go back to the first one, because when people first
You
start
rock,
seeing,
Heather.
you guys are cute, thank you. So just go here, Google Chrome, more tools, okay, and then developer tools, okay, and then you can run performance, you can run accessibility, you can run search engine optimization.
Okay.
And then just to analyze it, it's free. Sometimes if it takes a little bit of time, the best thing to do is just refresh something. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention is this site is really, it's not a site, it's integrated into Chrome. I find really, really helpful. If you're designing your website for the very first time, you can go into this and you can see it's not exact, but it's pretty close. If you wanted to see what your website looked like, for example, on an iPhone, for example, or an iPad Pro.
Come on.
And the cool thing about this is kind of the static ones. If you go down here to edit, you can enable pretty much all of the different platforms that are out there. So you can see, like, yeah, so it's kind of neat from the perspective of when you're setting up your website and testing it, does it look great on an iPad, but not so great on an iPhone?
You could test it right from within while you're editing your website. You could test it.
No.
Oh.
It has to be published, because, like, for example, if I did this right now because I'm logged in and I did a Lighthouse audit, it's not seeing the back end of it. So it actually, and that's a great question. If you ran your Lighthouse test, anything that you write it on, you run it on, if it's hidden, for example, if it's hidden by the page hider, you're not going to be able to run it on the test. The content and the site itself actually has to be public. Okay, does that help?
Okay.
Okay. And
she's a genius.
I wish.
Was there someone else that you wanted to share with, Heather?
Yeah, there's a couple of other questions. Esther says, what's the difference with using Lighthouse again? And Esther, there's not really any difference. It's more just making sure that your website is ADA accessible and search engine optimization friendly. And it just gives you where your website kind of has holes and some things you can work on and fix. Okay.
There's a question in the Q&A that's been here for a while.
Yes. Yeah.
This had to do with when you publish. They were suggesting that, if it takes a few months or longer to build your website, wouldn't it be a net positive to have Google pick up and show our coming soon page, given the age of a website is one of the main factors of SEO?
I personally, I keep saying that a lot, don't I, Diane? Sorry. I have mixed feelings about that. So I always look at from the perspective of, if you want to get things out there, set up a homepage, set up the pages you have ready, but don't set up publicly any pages that are not ready. So for example, if you wanted to have search engine optimization start picking up your website and you had the content for your homepage finished and even a contact us page or maybe a coming soon, I don't like coming soon. You had a page set up like, these are our services, this is our products, have some meat in there first. not so much just for search engine optimization, but more from the perspective of a customer or client. Okay. So if I'm a customer or a client and I went to, and I don't know exactly what these organic products, for example, and they said homepage, and then I went over to their products page and I saw coming soon, I'm probably not going to come back again. Unless somebody else told me, oh, you got to try these products that they had. Okay. If I'm going through all these pages and it says products, projects, and events, and it says coming soon and about us is coming soon, think of it from the consumer's perspective. That doesn't look good. So if you're creating a website and you just want to have a couple of pages public, sure, go ahead and do that. But just make sure that if you're advertising a product or service, that there's going to be enough content for the consumer, not just for Google to interact with it. What's the point of having a homepage and sticking it out there just so Google picks it up if you don't have any other information ready for people? Okay. Does that help a bit?
I think so. Works for me.
Okay. So, and yes, and Rick, thank you for the expectations for search engine optimization. There's a lot you can do yourself for free. You can also hire people to do it. There is some really, really excellent, and they're typically expensive, but they're expensive for a reason, good search engine optimization experts out there. Okay. There's also people that are scammers out there. If you ever get an email, and usually they'll email you, you're not going to find them on the internet, and says your website doesn't rank well for mashed potatoes or rank well for whatever your business is. Typically, those will come from a Gmail address or a Yahoo address. That should be kind of a tip off right away. And usually their solicitation will say, get to the first page of Google in a month or a week. You don't want those. They're what we call in the industry black hat. And black hat means that, yes, they can help your website get to page 1 sometimes in Google in a month. But what will also happen is they're doing it through non-best practices. So what happens is, the link to sites that are completely non-relevant that are getting a lot of traffic, for example, they'll go out and look for similar sites with blog posts and they'll put your links to your website in there. But what happens is it temporarily inflates your search engine optimization. And then what happens is Google comes along and goes, oh, wait, that's not cool. This is black hat. And then your site drops hotter than a rock. So just please be cognizant of that. The other part of that, to Rick's point, is it doesn't happen overnight. When you put your website out there, there's on-page search engine optimization and off-page search engine optimization. So it means that on-page, your photos have alt tags. And descriptions. The page is loading. There's some content on there. You've got all your details finessed, but you also need to have incoming links. So a Google My Business profile, Bing for Business, those are both free. Okay. It means that you need to be listed on other websites. So if you ever run your site, and can I use this particular site as an example of this, if that's okay?
I think it'd probably be dandy for Diane. She'd appreciate it.
Okay. I just want to check because some people are cautious. So if we don't mind, if we just wait for Diane to weigh on that. Actually, you know what? Let me just run this just as an example. Score.org. Okay. Okay. If I put this into Google, okay, there are some sites you can pay to do this for you, but you can also do this for free yourself. To check your off-page search engine optimization, you can do this. So I'm going to hit enter. Okay. You're going to take out the HTTPS and the www. And what this is going to give you is these are all the sites, for example, that are picked up. And I know that most pages in score.org are spidered or picked up by Google, but it's also going to pick up what other references. So there's Facebook page, there's the Score Foundation, there's Reddit, there's LinkedIn, for example, there's Skynova. So there's all of these other sites that are linking to score.org. That's your search engine optimization. Okay. And so I used quotes because it just helps specifically narrow it down. Because I found if you're Googling something, for example, and I recommend this, I am going scroll mode for just a second. I always recommend when you're in business, Google your business. So for example, if you wanted to say, let's just do my local chamber of commerce, for example, Kearsarge Chamber of Commerce. If I don't put it in quotes, what's going to happen is it's going to pick things apart. So it will return some searches with Kearsarge and some searches with Chamber and some searches with commerce in it. When I put a search string into quotes, it's going to come back with that exact phrase. Okay. Yeah. And text in quotes means literal text. So when I put that website address in there, it's not going to pick it apart. It's going to show me that particular search string. Okay. So this is another example of this. But make sure you Google your business and Google the URL of your business too, and Google your URL of your competitors. This really ties into search engine optimization because, for example, like if you have a competitor, if you have 12 different competitors and your 12 competitors are all listed on a website directory for construction, for example, and you're in construction and you're not listed on that website, and that website comes up really, really high in Google rankings, for example, those 12 competitors will generally rank higher in search engine optimization than you will. So when you research competitors, you can do that backlink search with your competitors' websites, and it will give you all of the websites that are connected to them. That's a whole nother hour and a half session we're done doing competition research, but that's kind of a little insight into that particular one. Okay.
We are getting a little long on
Yeah,
time.
I know. And if there's anybody that I did not address questions, I put my email into chat. Please feel free to email me, and I'd be happy to follow up with details. And thank you. Yes, I am definitely running long on time.
Oh, there's one in the Q&A. Can you go over how you got into the dashboard? Is the default with WordPress.com once you sign up? Is it the default?
Oh, okay. So in this particular case, you're not going to get into your own website, you're not going to go to WordPress anything. You're going to go to your domain name, and then you're going to type in WP-admin. And what it's going to bring you to is put in your username and put in your password, and then you're going to come into the dashboard. Okay. So you're going to go to your website first, and that's how you're going to get in. I hope that answers that question.
Okay, no more questions in Q&A.
Okay. Oh, and Esther said H1,
Right.
H2. Okay, so that's when you're doing blog content and you're doing, and I'll be quick about this one, and when you're doing page content, those are basically headers. And from a search engine optimization standpoint, Google and Bing and Yahoo like that. So for example, say you have 5 topics on a website. When you put the H1, H2, H3 headers in there, those basically are telling Google that they're kind of content blocks, if that helps explain it a little bit more.
We used to call them cascade style sheets.
Yep.
Yep, which helps Google understand this is really important. Okay, this is pretty important, but not as important.
Yep. The one thing too that I would just mention really, really quick is if you're getting into WordPress and you're poking around in the back end of it, there's only one space, and I'll bring this up. There's something that says theme file editor. Please don't mess with that. Just because that is the code that is your website is built with. And unless you're a coder and you know HTML and cascading style sheets and all of the rest of the back end of that, you can make one little change of that and your whole website can go wonky. So please, you can look at it, but just don't touch.
All right, wonderful, Heather. Just to wrap up a little bit, if you're looking for a SCORE mentor, it's score.org. Our chapter is Minnesota, so we're asking you to do that, but you can just go to score.org and search there. Also, I just want to remind you that you will be getting an email from our chapter, and it will have the links to parts 1, 2, and 3. You will also get a sheet of recommendations that Heather has put together of different resources that will be included in it. You'll also get from our national chapter a survey about this webinar and how it could be improved. I don't imagine you'll have any idea about that. But also, more importantly, what other webinars might you be interested in? We talked early on, perhaps before you got on, about our putting together an SEO, search engine optimization, just a webinar on that particular topic, because it is so big. And although Heather did talk about it a lot. There is a lot to talk about. So we might be putting one of those together. Because you have attended this webinar, you'll also be put on our mailing list. And so you should be getting the updates when we do put on a webinar like that. So I think fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Great series. Thank you. Well done. Very nice. Lots of nice comments, Heather. And again, I would like to thank you so much for giving us all of this time. I truly appreciate your sharing your knowledge with us in the last 4.5 hours of material in the course of our 3 sessions. So thank you very much, Heather.
Okay.
And
Can I add one final
yes,
thing? Because I kind of
please,
forgot,
go
and I
ahead.
don't think I mentioned this because I started talking off topic, but in topic about search engine optimization. If I hadn't mentioned this before, just keep this in mind. This doesn't happen overnight. It can take 6 to 8 months really to do good search engine optimization, whether you're doing it yourself or you're hiring a professional to do it. So just keep that in mind. It's an ongoing process, and it
An
doesn't
ongoing
happen.
process because they're changing what they're looking for.
Mhm.
And so you need to, yeah, some people feel, okay, well, I've done it
Mhm.
and it's great. I got 100% on it. Well,
Mhm.
maybe you did, but check it again.
Yep.
Good,
Absolutely.
good.
And
Good
Rick,
last
thank
comment.
for your additions. I appreciate.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
thank you all for coming. And I hope to see you at an upcoming webinar. Bye-bye all.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, everybody. Take care.